Welcome to another episode of Mutual Connection Podcast. My name is Shayan Mashatian, your host, and I have the pleasure of having Dr. Shaina Raza today with me. Hi, Shaina. Welcome.
Hi, it's really nice to have you. Thank you very much.
To introduce you to the audience of the podcast, I read a bit from your bio and then we get into questions and answers and exploring your great work. Dr. Shaina Raza, or let's call her Shaina from now on, she's an applied machine learning scientist at the Vector Institute for Artificial Intelligence in Toronto. Those who are not familiar with the Vector Institute, it has been co-founded by Dr. Jeffrey Hinton, as we call him godfather of AI, and the person who is behind new generative AI. He left the institute to Google, and he won Nobel Prize in physics for his invention in this area. Shaina has been working in responsible AI, machine learning, data science, and with more than a decade of experience bringing academic and industry together. She leads initiative on fairness in AI, bias mitigation in large language models, and also sustainable AI practices, which we get into it a bit later. She holds a PhD in computer science from Toronto Metropolitan University, used to be called Ryerson University, where her research focused on news recommender systems and accuracy diversity trade-offs. Previously, she was a postdoctoral research fellow in equitable AI at the University of Toronto, applying natural language processing and multimodal AI to public health challenges. Shaina has been a dedicated mentor and researcher, and she's committed to advancing ethical AI governance, ensuring AI technologies serve society equitably and responsibly. One thing that's in my research came up about you, Shaina, you are on one of the top 3 most cited researchers at Google Scholars if someone search for fairness and LLMs. So I'm so excited for conversation today because you are probably the first researcher I interview who is actually hands-on and developing these codes.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's really pleasure that I'm like one of the third most cited in LLM and fairness. Happy to answer anything related.
Absolutely. Let us start from how you got into fairness in AI. We understand everyone goes to school, get to do coding, computer science, and get more familiar with data. So people usually they decide they want to be an engineer, not with a focus on data, be more on algorithm and engineering part of it mostly, or look into the data. And when it comes to the data, then which aspect of these products you want to think about. It can be performance, how we make all these large data systems that they perform, regardless of the domain, or many different aspects of it. I assume you had a aha moment that at some point through your career and research, the issue of fairness or ethics of AI, how we label it, got your attention. And probably at that specific moment, you decided, oh, this is what I want to focus on and spend my maybe professional and academic years on it. Can you share if you remember that aha moment and what happened that you started working on this aspect of AI?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for asking. So like when I joined my PhD, so it was a computer science. I was not aware that I will be working a lot for the next decade exclusively on the fairness in machine learning and NLP and multimodality. When I was working on the recommender system, so I was reading papers and writing papers and a lot of discussion. One thing I noticed is that all the authors and even the big tech and everyone is racing for the best accuracy, which is honestly very much appreciated. Everyone wants to get the best accuracy in the algorithm. But because I was working exclusively on the news recommender system, so this brought in my attention. It was a concept called echo chambers. So basically, what happened when we try to have a lot of accuracy in our algorithms, let's say it's news recommender system. So what happened? We are personalizing too much of a specific viewpoint or news articles to the users, that they are captured in the filter bubble. So it means, like in this race of getting the best accuracy, I am also creating the filter bubbles, and which is actually affecting the whole society as well. By that it means, for example, if my news recommender system, it is too much advocating a particular viewpoint, and I'm trying to get the best accuracy out this thing will be amplified in the model predictions also. So then I thought that something is missing, there is a gap. And then there was a Netflix and the YouTube. I noticed the same thing, that for example, if you go to your login in the Netflix, you will get the same kind of movies or genres. But if you go to somebody else, your kid or your family, you will notice a transition. So what is happening? Something is lacking, which is diversity and serendipity. So that thing caught my attention, that I need to work on this because there's a gap. And when you fill the gap, you also bring new directions. So that was the starting point, when I decided that I need to go beyond accuracy toward the fairness, in machine learning. During that time, it was 2016 and 17. There was not much hype of fairness and like ethics, because people are more in the transition of having new algorithms and all this stuff. So I think I was one of the pioneers, and I faced a lot of challenges for two things, in order to convince my point of view to the other that yes, there's a gap, the diversity aspect is lacking. And also, because there was not much literature, so they were some of the challenges that motivated me to go more in the depth of these subjects.
Very interesting. You mentioned a few keywords. I would like to have a bit of deeper dive into them. You mentioned filter bubbles. My understanding is the difference between TikTok and why it has been so popular versus Instagram, Facebook, or Meta and Twitter is that, if I'm not mistaken, what you called filter bubble is exactly what Instagram and others they do. They follow your likes, what you share. They try to create a profile of user and then just show similar content. Is this what you are referring? And TikTok, I heard the serendipity you mentioned. They
Yeah.
expose user to the content they haven't seen before, but they find it interesting. Is that the correct categorization of how these two different systems work?
Yeah, definitely. Like from the algorithmic point of view, yes, that's my concept. Like same way, if you, for example, go to a particular social media portal and you have a profile, in order to give you the best version of your profile, the algorithms behind them, they are fighting. They want to get the best accuracy. So what happened? Okay, I get my the best personalization according to my gender, race, or my likes or dislikes, everything. But what is happening? I'm being recommended the same kind of thing. So yes, I call this filter bubble. I would say, like in terms of the entertainment, let's say in Instagram or YouTube or Netflix, it's fine. Only thing that is happening is I'm getting bored. But when it is the news, like the journalism, so what will happen? They are basically going to give you the news recommendation for a particular political point of view or something. So then here, like something is going wrong, because I will never be willing to listen the other point of view, the other party point of view. Then it's a danger, I think.
Can you explain how you go from this accurate content to fairness?
So as I mentioned, when I was making those algorithms, so I find that okay, I'm going, let's say 99% or to optimal level to the accuracy, but what I'm losing is diversity. There's a trade-off, like they're on the two opposite side. If I go towards the serendipity or beyond accuracy or diversity or novelty, I will lose little bit accuracy. Somewhere between them is the fairness, that we have to balance it. Beside this, these are those factors which are academic or which are related to algorithms or machine learning. Some of my personal aspects also inspired me to go toward the fairness aspect. One of the reason is that if we see the job market, or we see, for example, the hiring portals or these systems in the, I mean, the portals that give you the hiring and you apply to these systems. So what happened? Those systems are very much automated. When your resume is fed into those systems, and they parse it and they find the keywords. For example, this is a female, this is woman of color, or a woman in STEM, or a certain age group, or these are the gaps or something. The algorithms themselves are biased. So it's not just about the academic level, but also I was thinking that the automated systems are also biased. It has, there is a need that they don't need to be biased. There should be some fairness. Then when I went to the Public Health Ontario, and I was doing these algorithms and everything, to my surprise, because first time there was a transition from journalism to the public health, and I noticed that the data, it comes from a certain population group, normally from, mostly from the Europe or the North, which is fine because most of the research are going here. But what is happening? They are missing certain other demographic groups, and this, I mean, that make a effect. For example, whether you will be given this health insurance or not, your trust level, yes, a specific algorithm, for example, if it is for skin cancer detection, and all the data, it is about the white skin, as I mentioned, which is valid because the data is coming from those population groups. So if a person of color comes in, the algorithm will not identify it. So what will happen? This will be a if, like it's a false negative. Basically, it should be predicted as being positive, but it is not predicted. It's a missed, and this is also going to affect somebody's life. So these are all the factors that inspired me that yes, there is a gap and we need to see. So I think these are all the things, the fairness, whether it is for the journalism, for the viewpoints, or for the hiring systems, or for the health data. All these multiple factors, uh, they need to work on. And gradually I noticed that suddenly there was a big transition into the fairness in machine learning. Like people start studying this. Maybe there in the planet there may be some people like me who might have the similar kind of experiences, and we gathered. So now this is quite a hype. Like if you see, like every big tech, every organization, all of them have the responsible AI departments. They are looking into their data, they are looking into the algorithms and the model predictions. So these are some of the things like that are very much in hype and people want to study, but still data is lacking those things. So yeah, these are all the things.
The bias can come from algorithm, can be from bias in existing data, or bias because of lack of data. And it makes an imbalance if I
Yeah.
summarize it that way.
Yes.
You know, there have been a lot of or ideas or conversations that we can maybe do synthetic data and use it to address the lack of bias driven by lack of data. And we know what you mentioned, for instance, for skin studies, we know data set with a diverse skin tonality are very limited. In DNA and genetic testing, we know mostly has been done in Western Europe, North America. In many areas, we know this lack of data cause concern. With Dr. Botany, he was mentioning about college application, loan payments, HR. So we see this lack of data in many areas. I was curious, as a researcher who tries to address this at the code level, what are the techniques, what are the ways that you can use to mitigate this lack of data issue?
Like normally when I do, like for example in my works, there, as you mentioned, there are a couple of the ways. Sometimes upscaling, for example, like generating more synthetic data. But again, generating more synthetic data is also can be sometime a danger, because we don't know the accuracy of this, especially if you're working in the health domain. um, if for example I work in the journalism also, and I create synthetic data, there may be chances that this generative AI system is used to create further misinformation or disinformation. So I'm again scared. So in terms of the, when we train the algorithms, yes, sometimes we use the synthetic data, but it's not the best practice I would recommend, because especially the chances of misinformation and disinformation. So that's one of the thing. If we downscale the data, then again we don't have any data. Underrepresentation will produce more biases. So it's quite a challenge. Like I would say, like I mean, there is no one answer. It's more heuristics, which way you go and how you identify it. Sometimes we do during the pre-processing, as you mentioned, like data augmentation, synthetic data. Sometimes we do during the algorithms, which is like need more computer science skills, and like you have to play around with the hyperparameters and the algorithms and changing the layers if it is neural network itself. And sometimes during the post processes, so there's no like one universal rule. Sometimes we have to switch according to the thing. But again, as I mentioned, like um, this Gen AI has made it much more easy to create the synthetic data. But at the same time, myself as working in the fairness in machine learning, I'm very much afraid of misinformation and further disinformation. By
And
that
it
it
can
means,
replicate the bias already, make it even bigger,
yes.
right?
And like if you see the deep fake technology, if in order to compensate that, it start for example generating those deep fakes which seem very much like real, and my model is going to predict the same thing. So these are also some of the threats.
So let's go back a bit
Hmm.
to basic definitions. You mentioned it was interesting. It was first time for me. I learned this framework. So on one spectrum you have accuracy, on the other part you have diversity of data, and you see fairness is the balance between these trade-offs. How do you quantify this concept? Because one issue in AI and responsible AI is many of these concepts like ethics, fairness are very subjective. Anyone might interpret them differently. When it comes to the code and you want to, because you are going to kind of score maybe the outcome, right? From 1 to 100, where it sits, something
Hmm.
like that, I imagine. Can you walk us a bit through the process you do? If I'm a coder, I'm a data scientist, I want to measure the outcome based on the framework you introduced. What attributes I should look at? How do you measure it? Can you share some of those details, techniques with us?
Yeah, for sure. Like when like I do the coding, or like I mean I do with coding on this fairness subject. So mostly for example, there's a U.S. employment demographic groups. There are 7 groups: age, race, religion, and employment. So these are related to occupation. There are some codes. So normally we use those, but it can be related to the demographics. For example, age, gender, race, and all these things. In terms of the coding, like mostly how we quantify this, for example, for each demographic group, we divide it into two: the privileged group and the unprivileged group. How we find the privileged and unprivileged group? There are some heuristics also. For example, as I mentioned earlier, people say that normally white race is privileged in the data, which is fine because data is coming from that side. If you go to the other part of the world, it may be reversed. So first we find the privileged and the unprivileged group, and then we try to quantify the accuracy level across both groups. It means that on the aggregate level, my algorithm is giving me 99% and I'm very happy. But when I break it down into demographic groups, I notice that for race B, my accuracy is 10%, whereas for race A, my accuracy is 95%. Now, this is the concern. So that's the thing I need to break. So whichever is suffering, we don't want the one who has the best accuracy or which get the best prediction to suffer, but we want to rise those who are already suffering. So in that case, the demographic group which is unprivileged, we try to compensate for that. There are different ways again, as you mentioned earlier. Sometimes like creating some synthetic data. Sometimes try to like manually see what is happening, but if the data is big, obviously that is not possible. Then we try to bring more data related to this, make changes. We do some weighting, give more weights during the prediction to the unprivileged group. So basically, we do the quantification of the fairness in terms of different demographic groups, and we have to define the groups that what exactly. And sometimes these are like a very singular level. For example, I'm only seeing in terms of the age, gender, race, or like zip code or these things. Sometimes they're intersectional. It means I look into two, three groups together. For example, gender and age at the same time. gender and the race at the same time, because they bring further effects. So we have to like do different kind of permutations around the groups and see which one is suffering and how we can work around with those predictions and reweight our algorithm to compensate for that.
So in a maybe regression model, you can go and create subgroups inside those groups by combining these attributes, if I understand.
Yeah, regression model is one, but you know what? Like, okay, when our data is more categorical, for example, if I have to predict some hospitalization rate or some, for example, resources to be given to the patients or these things, then it's fine. It is a loan allocation or something. For the categorical level, these regression models or typical machine learning work. But I would say with Gen AI, the stakes are higher, things are different. The reason is that the data is unstructured, and they are multi-model. They are different kind of modalities. So during that time, things change. There are different other ways. So what I do in my work, when the, for example, predictions or the use case is very simplistic, simple machine learning work, I do this like regression model, logistic regression model, or some assemble model. These one. However, when I go to the opposite side, for example, I also work in the news recommender system a lot. The data is totally unstructured. I work on the multimodality also. Data is unstructured. During that time, my methods to quantify those biases are changed. And how to compensate for those biases to evaluate the fairness and everything, again, the methods are changed. The statistical definitions, like for example, the traditional machine learning, in order to quantify those kind of biases, I will use more statistical measures. But for generative AI, because they are sometimes also their responses are also called the stochastic pairs, it means what response they are going to give, I don't know. So in order to control that thing, I use different ways. For example, I control different hyperparameters, I change the configuration of my model. um, then there are other things we have to do. We use maybe some other models and off-the-shelf tools to evaluate them.
So by multimodal, you mean text, image, video, different type of data, or what do you mean
Yes,
exactly? Okay,
yes,
that's fine.
different type. Again, multilingual. When the data is multilingual, then again there are more biases. So we have to see all of these aspects.
So we come up with these objects, some attributes of them. For instance, if it deals with population, what are the attributes of them? You subgroup them and you run the model. I guess in the process you give them some weight, you run the
Yeah.
model, and the outcome comes out. Can you walk us through how you validate that? Because you can have human experts sitting there and give you feedback, or there's ideas AI can validate the outcome of the other AI,
Mhm.
and if that AI is biased, how does it work?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit, or maybe an example of how you validate the outcome after all of these processes you mentioned?
Mhm. Again, if it is categorical type of data, for example, if I have to predict the 3-day hospital readmission for patient or a patient's data, then like okay, I incorporate all these fairness thing in fairness thing into the model, and I'm now assuming my model will be very much fair when it produces the prediction. Okay, now I have the prediction. In order to validate that now the things are balanced or not, to some extent, I will use some statistical measures. It's like simple, like you use some, for example, ratio of the true positive, false positive, precision recall, sensitivity. I calculate them. They are trustable because they are very much mathematically calculated. If somebody want to have a human eye incorporate, that's a plus point. I will definitely do for this one. Now coming to the Gen AI and the multimodality, when the data is totally unstructured, yes, then what I do, once I incorporate a lot of fairness parameters and hyperparameters and algorithmic changes, and now I produce the outcomes. In order to validate it, now my because the outcomes or the predictions that I have for the Gen AI, they are very fuzzy. They're not categorical or one thing. So I evaluate it using some other metrics. um, for example, you know what, like I say that I use some judges. Now there are two type of judges. One is the human judge, and other one is the again AI, which can be biased, as you are saying. So there are different practices. What I use normally heuristically, like for my own work, I build a jury. In my jury, there are a couple of the human evaluators who do the post processing and see whether it is fair or not, because human in the loop is very important. And I also use a jury of the other models. For example, I use a judge model. Let's say the OpenAI models, especially the reasoning one, they are considered are like very accurate. I use one of them. I use another. Let's say some the best version from the Llama or the Mistral or the 5 model, and then I then try to have a majority voting from all of them, and then a kind of like, like veto power and this kind of thing I bring in my work. That's I do for my Gen AI work. So there are two different ways I evaluate it.
So how big is this jury? Is it like 12, 9 people as you do it, as we see in real life, or can be a smaller group?
It depends honestly. Like for example, I recently built a multi-model news data set. So the dataset size was 80,000 and the jury of the people were 21. And the jury of the model were 11. There was a reason I brought this odd number. You know what? Like, because, for example, if there are six are in majority and fifth one, so it resolved the tie. So that's the way I do. If the data is too much big, so the community becomes the jury. You know what, like if you use ChatGPT or deep seek or all of these like perplexity AI, you like feed some question, get the response. If you don't like it, there's always a thumbs down and thumbs up. So many people like us are giving these kind of feedbacks if they are too much annoyed. If they're happy, normally they don't click the thumbs up, but if they are annoyed, they do this thumbs down. So there's some community feedback also. So it depends. The data is too big, then these big tech, they take the community feedback. If the data is on a small scale, so like volunteer teams or some mechanical turks or these people, they can be hired.
So you
It,
kind of
it
outsource the feedback loop to volunteers who care about this and come and
yes,
participate.
exactly. It depends on the scale of the project also. Normally we do like that.
And in terms of domain, I guess if you are talking about misinformation in news is much more sensitive and subjective in order to measure accuracy of the model outcome versus planning for surgery room scheduling or something like that. Which of these techniques for which domain you think works best and which one still is too vague to apply these techniques for?
If it is a healthcare problem, like life sciences or physical, I mean, then I am very, very careful about the fairness of the algorithms. If I have to make a choice, even after the evaluation of the model, everything, I must bring a human in the loop. The reason is that it is related to somebody, let's say vital signs or some big decision. Then I'm very, very careful. There is no compromise that we rely 100% on the machine. So the health sciences, obviously that's more sensitive. If it is related to journalism or entertainment, if there's, for example, a false positive or false negative, the worst thing that can happen is that um, if it is a Netflix, I get bored if I don't get. I mean, I may leave the channel, I shift to the Prime or something. That's the worst thing. If it is like, for example, some campaign or social media campaign or something going on like the TV channels or something, then there's a community effect. It means if I get a piece of misinformation, um, with one person or two-person action, it won't affect. But if, for example, there is misinformation or deep fake that is posted, and within 5-10 minutes, thousand of them reposted, then this is going to make some effect. It can cause many many issues, like even in the case of like vaccines, people get so much biased. These are all misinformation. So now coming to your question, that which kind of metrics I use during which domain. For me, the health sciences or the financial domains in which the risk factor is too much high, I would use very much statistical technique to evaluate them and must have a human in the loop. If it is like not like the life sciences but other important aspects of the life, like the journalism, entertainment, and some recommendations, some, for example, shopping portals or these things, Then obviously a mix of both work, like the different kind of the way we can evaluate it. Human in the loop is important, community effect is important. There are different ways we can mitigate it.
We know LLMs are not good with numbers, right?
Yeah.
ChatGPT is awful in kind of math because never does the calculation, just sees who said 2 times 2 becomes what and finds the closest answer, right? On the other side, these models are strong in prediction. That's, I guess, what is in the core of them. Do you see that at some point we can have a hybrid model of a statistical models and LLMs that practically brings the best of two worlds? Because now what we used to call AI is called narrow AI or weak AI versus general AI. Do you see the industry trend going that way? Because I can see if we combine these two, that would be extremely powerful. Is it something you work on, or you see this trend might happen in near future?
I have not worked on this one, but definitely I see a transition in this one. For example, having a more mathematical kind of model and assembled with a LLM. This is a transition. Like I have seen in academia, people are shifting to this like heavily. And one of the reason, as you mentioned, also because this mathematical reasoning of these some of the big LLMs are even like so poor that it's a threat. They cannot do even a simple calculations like a calculator that you have in hand. There's going to be a lot of research on this, and I think like whoever is watching our podcast and they belong to the research and academic community, this is going to be something in the next few 5 years, assemble of these models and these models being more strong in terms of the mathematical reasoning. In the current state, what is my observation working with these models is that they are very stochastic. They produce random. You can control some hyperparameters, for example, temperature or like the model prediction and the tokens, these things. But still, they are very much stochastic. You don't know what they are going to produce. So this mathematical thing, like even the same math question, you ask it 2 times, every time it will give different like answer. That's why the trend of the reasoning is getting more and more attention, and you see this thing in the deep seek also, and the newer versions of the OpenAI, for example, O1, O3, they are working exclusively on the reasoning. Like some people also say that they have the PhD level intelligence in the sense because they think, rethink, they reason, they argument, counter or argument, and then give you an answer. So I think this trend as reinforcement learning being merged with this LLM work, it is going to bring a lot of transition and a lot of accuracy in terms of the mathematical reasoning and the coding and these operations.
Definitely, DeepSeek is on my list to ask you about. But before going there, you mentioned reasoning, which kind of goes back to DeepSeek too. I have a question. If data is biased or algorithm are biased, even if we push the model to do more reasoning and reposting that question, it wouldn't produce different results, right? Because inherently there is no enough data or data is biased. Is that a correct statement? That reasoning wouldn't address bias?
I totally agree with you. This is true. The reason is because at the end of the day, like in the back end, they have all the data which is biased. Then in that case, it will not work. Um, but like I think eventually these models, I know like there was a lot of evaluation benchmarks that also tell you the biases of these big LLMs for different demographics, and there were a lot of discussions and everything and results and benchmarking results. Eventually with each of their newer version and the patches, these models are also improving. They are trying to have this kind of the guardrails so that they don't produce the biases. We cannot have a like world with 100% like this thing being removed, because as long as we are alive, we are in a society, each of us are biased to some extent, so we can expect these models to also. However, in the newer versions of all of these models, they have a lot of like guardrails and their the policy to control the harm. There's a lot of thing I have find. Even if you see like um, sometimes there is a, if we are doing some kind of benchmarking, I also not notice that some of these models have a lot of refusal rate, and because they don't even want to intake any biased output, whether in the form of the image or the text. So this thing is happening. But we cannot have a world 100% free as long as all of us do have some cultural and also biases in our society.
Yes, I mentioned somewhere if we have a biased society and all the content on internet is biased, why do you expect AI suddenly becomes
Yes.
so objective? Because it is at the end a mirror of the society and the data we give it. So let's go back to DeepSeek.
Yeah.
Um, where would you like to start? Maybe we start with how DeepSeek works, basically. I know a lot of people have explained it, there are papers about it, but in very simple terms, can you share why it has been a big deal and how they did it?
DeepSeek, it has been, I think, from the last few months, but the reason it has suddenly there's a more hype because of its competition with OpenAI reasoning model O1. Um, One of the thing, the strong point I see in the DeepSeek is reasoning capability, which we are getting for free. If you use another model from a big tech, so for in order to use that reasoning, you have to pay sometimes in terms of monetary values, or sometimes like those models are also very big. I think the DeepSeek, the reason there's a hype, first of all, its reasoning is very, very strong. It has the mixture of expert, like a lot of models, and there's a lot of optimization. Um, you know what, like the carbon footprint emissions, like whenever there's some model card created, let's say Llama or OpenAI or any of the model when they come into the market. So if you see their model cars, there's always some mention of the carbon emissions, which are normally in tons. And if they're in tons, it means that how many trees we have already burned because of this carbon dioxide produced during the preparation or the pre-training of these models. For the DeepSeek, one of the striking point is that I'm not like advertising it, but what is my observation? So the carbon footprint emission in its model card is also very less compared to some of the big models. It means it has been optimized and made smaller for use for the folks who don't have, like for example, very big GPUs. And also the idea is to make this thing like these reasoning models or these conversational systems accessible to everyone. So I think those are some of the things that make it more appealing, at least compared to its competitors. So that's my observation. I myself tried and compared between two three other reasoning models. The results were excellent. I don't say their results were not good; they were equally good. But if you're getting the same thing for free and with less carbon emissions, or like you don't have to set up a big hardware or GPU or cloud for that, then why not?
Yes, that's what we hear from anyone who has tried it. Can you walk us a bit through how they did it? I heard they have used some of the OpenAI output, and if they have, going back to our validation conversation, using AI to train or validate AI, if they have been using OpenAI, shouldn't be the result fairly similar to output of the OpenAI? Is it OpenAI becoming a benchmark for these models? Can you share your thoughts about that?
I'm not very much aware whether in the background they are using this or not. I know, like in the LinkedIn, there were some posts. I didn't go into detail. However, there may be some concept of distillation, like the teacher and the student model. I'm not aware whether they are using this kind of distillation. But what I think is that I mean, one thing I'm for sure that they are equivalent. They have equivalent working as the OpenAI because of their direct preference optimization function. Basically, the model has been pre-trained to align with the human preferences. So I think this is one of the strong point. Um, I honestly don't have any opinion or any observation or any evidence that OpenAI being used as a backbone for this one. But for sure, they are both competitors.
Yes, they say they combined
Mm-hmm.
some output of the OpenAI and combined it with reinforcement learning so they could achieve
Mm-hmm.
this very fast, which is interesting that even they didn't, I heard they didn't hack OpenAI, they just used a lot of API keys. Somehow they could mm, utilize APIs of OpenAI at a very large scale. So to validate a lot of the outcome of their models. I think as a researcher, you like that it is an open source and open weight, right? Can you tell us a bit how often happens you go and look at those weights and change them? Do you do that? The value of open source, how you use it practically on a day-to-day basis?
I love open sourcing and I love open source model for many reasons. Like it is accessible to you without any payment. For the research purpose, you can even like use them again as a teacher student model. It's easy. You can make some changes inside the model, add some other layers, optimize it, or like make another version of that. It's much easier. In my work, sometimes I like what I do basically, if they open source model, I take them and fine tune on my own data, make sometimes changes, little bit changes. For example, like try to make it more customized or more specialized according to some
Can you
specific
give an
problem.
example? For instance, you mentioned
Mhm.
the fairness, accuracy
Mhm.
versus diversity. Can you give us an example how you would do that for a
Mhm.
case?
For example, some of the works that I did recently, Llama model, Llama 3. Llama 2, and then Llama 3, Llama 3.1, Llama 3.2. I did with all of them, and then I did with the Mistral and the Phi and Gemma and other models also. So basically, what I do, I try to make them the bias detector and the debiaser. Unbiased is one of my project that get some insights like around the world. So how look now what happened, like when I give these talks, so somebody asked me, okay, I can use this llama model and give it some prompts and I can make it a very nice debiser. Then why are you, how you are saying that you're making it very specialized according to your data? So there is some difference when you just do the prompting or the prompt tuning versus when you do the fine tuning and the same thing, the teacher student model. The second one is more specialized. By that it means like in my work basically I sometimes have to find specific kind of the biases, something very implicit which you cannot find readily from the the data, which are very implicit meaning. So I have to work around with those a lot, especially for the journalism and the news articles. And in the images, again, the visual cues and finding those things is very very difficult. I can always use prompting. I can use some OpenAI model or I can use some free model. But if we make a specialized version of that model, the open source model, especially the Llama one, which make it, I mean, this open source model make it much easier for us. So what we do, we add another layer of specialized data fine tuning on that one. And sometimes we use the DPO, direct optimization preference with human. I mean, we use all these kind of techniques, and at the end of the day, what we have a product that is specifically designed for that thing. For example, in my case, the bias detection or the debiaser model. Then what I did, I evaluated the quality of using it without fine tuning, adding extra layers on the top of a fine tuned model versus simple prompting. There were huge difference in the results also. The stability, coherence, how your model is responding, all these things are, there's a huge difference. So that's why I love this open source model, that you can use their ready-made weights and add your own novelty. You can use different ways. You can optimize them for some specific prompts. You can add guardrails on them. You can do a lot of things which is not possible if the model is closed source and its model weights are not available. So these are
And you
some
can
of the
make
use
them
cases.
biased too, right? You can say, for instance, give in the
Mhm.
profile, give certain gender higher weight. You can do that too, right? It can go either way.
Sorry, repeat it.
As they are open, you can also introduce some bias to them. Let's say if you use this AI for hiring selection, you can say if the applicant is woman, give it higher priority, for instance, or other groups. Is
Mhm.
that correct? You can do anything with them, right?
Yeah, I mean, there are many ways to jailbreak these models, and there was some research also that, like, in which authors have used different techniques to jailbreak these models. First of all, each of their newer version, when they release the model card, they do talk about the guardrails, the further guardrails that we have incorporated. It means if I go to any one of these models, I feed in, okay, don't give the jobs to the female. If they're male profiles, so filter them. Some months ago it was possible and people might have used it, but now they have introduced a lot of guardrails, so it's not possible. Now coming to the second
So
part.
you mean inside open source they have added these guardrails?
Yes, they have, yeah,
So,
Mr.
but if it's
Model.
open source, you cannot go and override those guardrails.
Yeah, that's the thing I'm going to tell. So now authors have even find a way to jailbreak those guardrails. Yeah, for example, some of the recipes that they have used, if I write in English, because these models are normally pre-trained in English, and I say, okay, give me, um, I give a very biased query and expect it an answer, it will refuse because it has the guardrails. But if I give it in some ASCII format or some other language, or in some hidden ways, they are proof that those models have been jailbroken, so they are still bypass. So that's the beauty of the research. Like we, for example, we bring this perspective and we have some publication in the paper, and then what happen, obviously it will get the site from these model makers, they will revise it, so that's the revisions also going on. But yes, for now they can be jailbroken, but again, each of their version, their patches, there are ways to control this.
So if we compare meta models, which they are open source, and DeepSeek, in terms of licensing, we know Meta has a lot of restriction. It's not an MIT license. You cannot use it to compete with them, or if you use it at a very large scale, they don't like it, they don't allow it. But aside licensing, if you want to compare something like DeepSeek and Meta, you think they are open source in the same way? It's just a matter of the weights and measures they have, or you think they are also different in terms of within open source category?
I have not read exactly the licenses of these models, but one thing I know, like for example, for the Meta and some Microsoft model, for example, Phi and those Belly Jama Google from, you have to fill in some form even if you are going to access them on the Hugging Face. So they obviously you need some institutional address. I know many of the independent researchers who were not given this kind of privilege and they feel very bad about this. For the DeepSeek model, it's openly available even through like GitHub and through Hugging Face and many ways. So there might be some difference between the way they have been open source. But yes, obviously, like if other one is giving you more accessibility even to the independent researchers or the practitioner, the second category will get more highlight.
So you cannot run Meta on your local computer at home. It has to be somewhere hosted on the cloud, right?
So they are, I mean, their modelwares are released on their website and the Hugging Face. So when we fetch the model, it is downloaded on our drives, whether it's a cloud or on the local system. So we get the all modelwares. What I'm trying to say is that they have a little bit this restriction that you fill your institutional address. But if somebody has downloaded it, they can obviously share it with other people also.
Okay, okay. So it's a formality. In the bio I had from you, you mentioned sustainable AI. What is sustainable AI?
The reason I get so much sustainable, into the sustainability, first of all, sustainable AI is very much related to the green AI. This is one of the um, like uh, the goals of the sustainable development goals. They're one of the goals. The idea is to have a sustainable environment, green environment. The climate change is one part of this. Now coming to the AI part of this, so it is also being said that the way we are using all these GPUs and the clouds and all this infrastructure and running big models, LLMs and VLLMs, we are also, these models are producing a lot of carbon dioxide, carbon footprints. So that is the sustainable AI. It is also related to the climate change, but the factor to be blamed here is the AI. So what happened basically after 2022, especially after Chat GPT, there was a huge line of the big tech who start producing LLMs, and then there was a race of producing larger and larger and the larger. In this race, what happened with each LLM? The amount of the carbon dioxide they produce is equivalent in tons, especially during the pre-training phases, which means that, for example, when GPT-3, not I'm not talking about the 4 or 3.53, it was being pre-trained, it is said that the carbon emission that are produced is equivalent to burning around like 70,000 trees for 1 year. So these are some so these then you know what, like the people working the responsible AI, they start thinking that these AI factors are also adding a lot to the climate. Then the sustainable AI comes more into the fashion, and then the green AI. I recently have because I work exclusively on responsible AI, and I think sustainable AI is one of the branch of responsible AI. This is our responsibility also. So in sustainable AI, basically what I do, I study and implement those kind of the methods that optimize your models so that you get the same kind of the results but produce less carbon emissions. One of the very like well-known example is that, for example, Llama 3, or let's say GPT. I will talk about the open source model because they are easy to fine tune. Let's say Mr. Model, Llama model, they have been pre-trained. I know they still have. If you see the model cards in the Hugging Face on their website, they have tons of carbon dioxide. But when we fine tune them, the amount of the carbon footprints that is produced is very very least. I have those experiments also. I love to share with the community also. Some of them are uploaded. So basically, if you fine tune, for example, Llama model or Mr. model, it will produce few kg of carbon emissions, which is very least already, from 90% to like 0.2%, this kind of transition. So that's already we are coming into the sustainable AI. Now we want to do further. We want to even reduce those few kgs to few grams. So then we use different optimization techniques. So you might have heard about different optimization techniques recently. For example, QLoRa techniques. There are GGUF techniques. Olama and Sloth, they are using a lot of optimization, even like from 16 bits to 4 bits to 2 bits to 1 bit. So these star attention, flash attention, these are different techniques that can be introduced in the market. So what I do, I also incorporate those techniques into my, like, during training these LLMs. What happened if during the fine tuning you have already have a big transition from 95% to 2 kg. Now with this one, it's a few grams, like 50 grams or like 100 grams. It depends on how much data you use, but you reduce further. So if many people like me start doing this around the globe, you imagine that how much carbon footprints will be reduced per year. So that's the goal of the activist and
I
the
see.
passionate people who are doing
Yeah, I
this.
heard when ChatGPT was launched, that every question you ask is like ChatGPT has a glass of water and then answer the next one. Someone, I don't know if it's an accurate estimation or not, but I heard the amount of water needed to empower the system is like one glass of water per question. And I thought that would be, is it a correct or accurate
Uh,
estimation,
yeah.
or what you, just
Mhm.
to give it a bit more sense, if you have heard about it
Mhm.
or have any opinion?
Uh, Honestly, I have not heard about this, but I know one thing, that during that time when it was launched, for one query there was huge like footprints, carbon footprints. I'm not aware. You know what? Like in sustainable AI, people like create this kind of like logical relations. For example, some people say that how many trees are burned. Some may use, for example, a glass of water. Some use how many fuel is being burned by a car, this car, that car. So they're different. Like some take the aeroplane example. So there are different analogies we can
You
use.
make it more
Yeah.
tangible. Uh,
Yes, exactly.
so let me ask you this. You know, we call this DeepSeek effect, right? Suddenly everyone is talking about LLM is now commodity, is not about novelty. And I guess when you work, someone like you works on a model and really fine tune it or adjust it to minimize bias, all that, probably for a long time we want to use it. We don't want just to replace it with another model. Do you see that we see a shift from full attention to LLM toward application layers? And because when LLMs came, everyone, I personally, I thought, okay, there will be a rush to this market, and then it will be a winner takes all. We eventually find Uber and Lyft of the industry, or iOS and Android of the industry, and then we see a lot of applications being built, right? But then we ended up with 1 million LLMs on Hugging Face at some point. I don't know
Yeah.
if there is more or not. So
Yeah.
do you see eventually we are going toward the application layer and LLM value goes down because they are all more and less perform at the same level? What's your prediction of the future?
Um, Definitely, there will be a lot of things about transition to the small language models, and already, I mean, these big techs have created a small language models of each of their variant. For example, even for the Llama, if you see the Llama 3.2, 1 billion is much smaller. Same way, there will be a lot of fashion of the smaller language models, although they will have the flavor of these LLM like generative AI. Yes, I mean, like, I also foresee something like this. For example, as you were saying that all the LLMs sit in one place and there's an application layer and people use it. They already, if you see that many startups that are being created, what they're doing, they just they're just a wrapper on the top of these models. So it means that I think there should be a stopping point where new LLMs will not be much appreciated unless there is something new or something that break the tradition of the LLM, because it's just a replication now. Like you launch with a new name, and I see like thousands, even like I think millions of the rappers every day you see around the world. So there need to be some transition. I think like, like when there's a hype, so everyone goes after that. So I think there will be something new. I
Yeah,
don't know what that will be, but something reinforcement learning
that's the
and
conversation. They said everyone was undermining these wrappers around LLMs. Now they say, okay, those wrappers are actual application that solve a problem and users use, and the
Mhm.
one who build loyalty around it and have, a business model around it will be
Mhm.
successful, no matter what LLM is behind the scene. But it's interesting. You see still small language models which are specialized in per industry or use case. You think still there is room to grow in that category, if I understood your response.
Yeah, I think there will be. I mean, for example, small language models customized according to your specific use case, and then you can also brought some changes inside this that will add more value instead just wrapper. Because okay, I'm like sometimes I just think that if somebody is creating a wrapper, that what is their contribution other than from the business perspective? Okay, they may be satisfying some clients for the time being. If the actual model is broken or something has gone wrong, it means your app will fail also. So I think there will be more transition, for example, I already see with this, for example, Olama and Unslot, that they give you this kind of optimization that you can offload all these models locally even on your system. The good thing is that people working, for example, in the healthcare sectors, and they, like I have met many people in the public health and the healthcare clinical health, and AI, they don't want to work with these big LLMs. They say that if you put our data on the cloud or give to some API, there will be privacy and those issues. So they are very happy with this kind of transition, that you offload all the model weights on your local and there's no internet connectivity, IP connectivity. So I think that thing will come more in fashion, but when it is going to happen, I mean, it's already happening, but
Yes, also in the enterprise, a lot of information
mm,
needs, and people don't want to risk an employee suddenly release name of customers, patents still not
even
quite out, and
financial, when there is more like
financial.
bank transactions.
Another question I'm really curious to see if you have worked on it or what you know about. We know adversarial AI or red teaming as a technique to test
Mhm.
fairness or security, especially of the models. Do you have any experience with that and do red teaming for LLMs?
I have not done red teaming, for example, with the big tech, but like internally in our, like when we do the research, we do have these kind of activities, the red teaming, and we make teams and we evaluate it and for different things. For the second part of your question, for adversarial training, so I think that is very interesting, especially when I see my work for the misinformation and the disinformation. You know what, like AI generated misinformation and disinformation, whether deepfakes or in the form of the text, that's a big problem. People are very worried. Even sometimes when I see some video or like some audio in some social media, sometimes I'm convinced. So breaking this thing is very very important. So now for the adversarial training and these things, there is I sometimes foresee a concept of constructive disinformation or regulated disinformation. What I mean by that, for example, like Okay, if we see the social media or the like news, like websites or these portals, um, one news type of news is genuine, the information is real. The other one is the disinformation. Now there is AI generated disinformation. The thing is that how I'm going to differentiate between this AI generated disinformation and the real disinformation. The real disinformation is also important for me, because if, for example, some celebrity or some big figure, they have said something not in a nice way about some group, I should be aware of that, because like I should be aware of that for any reasons. Now the thing is that if the AI has produces this disinformation and the person has never said, and I start trusting AI, then this is a danger for both me and the person who is being targeted. So I used adversarial training recently to try to differentiate between the AI generated or generative AI or these LLM generated disinformation versus the real. This is just like, I give you a very simplistic example. For example, if you say some student to write an essay, the person write an essay and give it to you as if you're a teacher. If a person used ChatGPT to write an essay, then again he or she will give you this deliverable. Then how you're going to differentiate between the AI generated essay and the real essay? You may have some heuristics in your mind. Okay, the sentence is too long, the English is too perfect or something, but you don't have a quantifiable way to differentiate between these two. So here, I think the adversarial training, at least I am using, what I'm trying to do, the actual disinformation or misinformation and the AI generated. And then I try to make my model identify between these two. This is very important thing. So adversarial training can be used for this thing. For example, you have a generator, you have a discriminator. Your generator will generate some information if you use some Gen AI model in the back end, but your discriminator should be able to distinguish between the actual disinformation piece and the AI generated. And the deep fakes also come under this category. So that's the thing I see. Like,
Very, very interesting. Yes, until I don't get into these conversations, it doesn't happen to think so deeply about those differences. One question I always have is these LLMs, and it goes back to fairness and how they respond, or even producing this misinformation. I assume they have an understanding of human being. And I have tested this. I asked ChatGPT and
mhm,
Anthropic Claude and Lima about, okay, I'm asking these questions. You assume I'm human. What are your assumptions about me
mhm,
or human being? And each one answered differently. Of course, there was common areas.
mhm.
You are a knowledge seeker. You are this. You are that. But if you dig deep a bit, you see how they are different. Do you think these LLMs really can predict or understand human being the way they are trained, or no? It's not. It's just some syntax. There is no understanding of how they perceive human being.
Uh, I think, okay, for example, if you are using one LLM for daily conversation or task, for, let's say, for letter writing or something, or some simplest task, if I am using the same model LLM for my task, there's something called the persona. They understand the personas, they are sensitive to that. So what happened, after some time, your, like, we both have the same brand, let's say, of LLM. Your LLM will start behaving like you're start giving you information according to you, because it understands your tone and everything. And my LLM will do the same. There's a small experiment, like somebody in my team they did to the chat GPT. Each of us has a different login, obviously. We ask differently, like each of us ask the same question to our chat GPT. They tell me something about me that I don't know, and it really told something about me and each of the person.
But you
That,
had the memory on, right? Because
yes.
I don't have the memory on. I do
Mhm.
temporary chats, for instance. If I do that, they
Okay.
won't know. But if you
Then
say
then they
if
don't know.
so,
That's
they
incognito.
memorize and they start building a persona.
Yes, that's the way they start building it. Yeah.
But by default, they also have some understanding of human being or not. For instance, humans are this and that. They don't like to be lied to. Are those go into their system prompts, or I was a bit curious about, because when you especially
Mm-hmm.
when you talk about misinformation. If AI going to generate misinformation, they have an understanding, I guess, of what is believable by
Mm-hmm.
humans, and they try to align it. Is it that kind of layer of research and investigation you get into it, or no, it is another layer of research?
You mean like these models, like they start producing disinformation, like?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
because they want to. This information, but it
Mm-hmm.
also needs to be believable by others, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they should have these kind of assumptions about even when they create this information.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I mean, like I have never honestly seen this point, this excellent point from that lens, that they might have some information that they start producing this thing. Because recently, what happened, if we give these kind of prompts to these models, they refuse to give you disinformation and misinformation. You know what, like disinformation sometimes they refuse. There's a refusal rate, and as I talked earlier in our podcast, that there are also a way to jailbreak it. But for the misinformation to produce, it's very, very easy. I mean, you know, they hallucinate a lot. Even the best model, they hallucinate a lot. Like if you ask, for example, what is the capital of France? So I know it will give you the right answer, but it may not give you, and it may tell you the story in a way that you start trusting it. So the misinformation piece is very hard to find. Disinformation piece can be controlled. So that's my thought. Like they are more prone to misinformation compared to disinformation.
I see. I had a lot of questions for you.
Yeah,
This
for sure.
is very interesting. I have a couple of more to ask. One is, if someone wants to, let's say, data scientists, they're getting into field of AI, and responsible AI is an important aspect of it. I guess now we are at the phase that everyone says we need one of these things. Which one is better? How we use it? Which is the best way for organization for their purpose? What is your recommendation if someone wants to do similar work to your work, to get into
Mhm.
fairness, responsible AI design and implementation? Where should they start?
Um, if they want to start, honestly, it start at the personal level. So, what are your motives? When you have these motives to be fair and responsible and to work along this line, so definitely your intentions will create the paths for you. That's for sure. No, in terms of at the same time, I would say career is also important. Monetary values, these things add because you want to live, you have families. Um, then it depends. For example, some big tech, they do have the departments of the responsible AI, but they may have different definition of the responsible AI. They have this proprietary culture and this corporate culture, and obviously for profit is something important for you. So if a person want to work in this domain and let's say enter into one of these organization, inside as a person, he or she may have certain principles of responsible AI, not just responsible AI as a human, but they have to listen to the, I mean, what are the rules and the regulation in the
So,
organization.
if there, is there any program or course they can take or community they can join to learn from the community? Are there communities around this work somewhere on Reddit or anywhere they can search for what they should look for?
In terms of preparation for this material, I think Coursera and like Google and the YouTube videos, there are hundred of. I would say start simple from machine learning in fairness. Once this thing is done, then they go to the Gen AI because simpler is obviously make the. Honestly, I did everything through googling, through YouTube's, and then reading some of the research papers. And after that, you eventually make your interest group from around the world. People join you, you join them. That's the way. But you should have some foundation and some theoretical knowledge also.
So, are there certain open source or online libraries you use that later you can share with me? I added to the comment. What are the tools that you use for AI
Mm-hmm.
validation? I guess there are some you use,
Mm-hmm.
right? Can you name a couple of them right now? Which one you use for measuring the weights or metrics?
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything you use
Um,
regularly?
there are many, like for example, AIF 360 IBM. They are one, but there are a couple of more like them. Like What I do honestly, I mean, like they're just like some statistical measures you can program that using even R language, using Python language. It's very simplistic. What I would say, like tools are important, but a person must know. For example, if you can create the precision and recall formula or accuracy formula through the true positives and the false positives and the rate, the same way these fairness metrics are being calculated. So this is very easy. This is the evaluation part. Now coming to the model algorithmic part. So in order to make changes in the algorithm, yes, there are some off-the-shelf tools also for again IBM AIF 360 is one of the famous one people use. Um, but like you can also, I mean, incorporate those kind of things if you're working with the algorithms. You're obviously working with the algorithms because you must have some connection with AI or computer science. It means you know how to code it. And then there are certain layers of certain optimization function that you need to break in and make changes or some add some constraints for the fairness. So these things are possible all through coding. Off the shelf tools are available, but then you may not have that kind of liberty to play around with the things.
Great. And I guess with new open source models, easily you can run locally. It makes it easier to play with those weights and metrics. Two more
Yeah.
questions. Uh, the papers you have published,
Mhm.
I see one after the other. Each one is very interesting. What is your most favorite paper you have published yet?
Uh, One of my most favorite paper, it's a I can share in the chat. It is about the fairness. Um, just, so just 1 minute. That is most my favorite. There's a reason because for first time I get into working into the fairness metrics for different LLMs. Before that, I was working more on the machine learning side, so this gave me a lot of exposure. Let me share. I mean, there was that was a whole Bible of like um, 100 of the methods that how to evaluate different LLMs for fairness through different angles. For example, for stereotypes, for toxicity. I think the chat is here. I can drop in
Great.
here.
Yeah, please send it to me and I add it to the comment. And
Yeah, for sure.
another question, you mentioned you work with some communities for validation of the models, get feedback. Are there organized somewhere if someone wants to collaborate with you on those models and AI? Is there any way they should contact the institute, or how people can collaborate with you? Non-coders, those who are interested in validating AI, is there a mechanism, a process for that?
At this point, it is all volunteer and out of interest. Like, for example, some people contact me. I also contact some people. It's all like kind of interest group we have on the internet. For example, I'm connected to one person, and then there's a whole cycle. Email is the only point of contact for now.
Okay.
There's no formal procedure, and when like-minded people come, so we collaborate and we validate the models and we work further.
Great. Maybe that's a good opportunity to create those kind of groups. More people
Yes.
come and find it more easily.
Yes.
And couple of personal questions at the end. What kind of music you listen?
Honestly, it has been many years. I have not heard much music. Um, yeah, I really, I mean, like, I used to hear the music, like, I'm South Asian, so music from that area. But recently, I'm not much into
You're
this. I
just
think,
busy coding. You don't listen
ex-
to music as you code. I Yes.
I think your code and your stuff become your music.
Exactly. It is the sounds of keyboard, I guess. And
Exactly.
it goes same thing for the movie genres, or you
Mhm.
spend some time to watch.
Yeah, I
Let
do
me ask you
watch.
this. I always think, do
I
data
do watch.
scientists, you
Mhm.
watch? Okay. Uh,
Yeah. So I
which
like
one?
three. I like two kind of genres lot, and my Netflix is loaded with only those. One is the thrillers and suspense, and the time travel. You know, like quantum computing. This fascinates me a lot. I watch time travel movies not because like this is some like scientific fiction or something, but you know it has some roots in the quantum computing. I want to see that. Like if I have to revise my PhD or do another, that will be the quantum computing. That's why.
Very interesting. This is what I was going to say. Most of the data scientists I see, they somehow are interested in sci-fi and some sort of futuristic
Mhm.
genres, either in literature or movies. That is fascinating. Anything else you would like to add to our very interesting conversation?
Um, yeah, I mean, like, I think some people ask me also like about my journey and all these things. I think hard work and consistency is very important. What I have observed in, what happened, like, when, okay, let's say there's a new technology, let's say LLMs or some reinforcement learning, something, people get into anxiety for these AI, like everyone want to be in fashion and everything. I would say like consistency and those things are more important. If you are going to work in the responsible AI or any of the data science, it should not be because of the hype. You must have some good reason in your mind that you should have some, you need to do some social good also. Earning money is important, but at the same time, what social good you can bring. So that's the thing I say to everyone. The reason is that because if you go for the fashion or the hype, what happen, tomorrow there's a new thing and you will lose your passion, and then like there's a transition. So if you do good something for the community, whether for AI, for sustainability or anything, if you have a passion in your mind, nature will make thousands of ways for you.
This is a great point. Thank you for sharing it. Actually, now that you share this, I ask you how to keep up with this extremely fast pace of change. Isn't it stressful? It could be somehow, right? Before you finish one model, something else is there, then you need to compare. How do you deal with that?
First of all, these newsletters obviously they add a huge in my knowledge. LinkedIn and Twitter and all these newsletters add a huge thing. But you cannot read all the time. Your brain need to sleep and do other things also. I think again we should go for the method. For example, if you're going to work on generative AI or let's say LLMs, so it means you're working on generative AI. You focus on the method, not on the brand. That's the thing I would say. If you focus on the method, maybe after some year you will also develop a similar kind of the brand. That's the thing. So in my case, what I do, I go for the method. I know I work on fairness, like responsibly and fairness and everything. So for me, whether it is a simplistic machine learning model, logistic regression, it's a big LLM, for me, my principles are the same. I focus on the method and the thing, not on the branding.
That's a great advice. Thank you very much, Aina, for your time. I learned a lot. I need to go back
Like,
and digest some of the interesting concepts you shared with me today,
okay.
and definitely read your papers more often, and hopefully I can finish them all. I know it takes some time, but I will. I'm working on them.
Okay, thank you very
Thank you
much.
again, and I hope we talk again, maybe in a few months or year, depends how fast things change, and
Yes, for
see
sure.
what are the latest and greatest in the field.
Mhm. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I was with Dr. Shaina Raza, the researcher, senior researcher at Vector Institute in Toronto, and we discussed a lot of technicalities of building, validating, and future of responsible AI. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.